They said if you dropped a fork in the obsidian room, you apologized to the floor. They said if you dropped your gaze when the wrong man walked in, you might live to see another shift. There were rules in that restaurant. No one wrote them down. No one had to. Never look at table 9. Never speak unless spoken to. And if the man at table 9 taps his finger, you move. Margot Reed knew the rules. Everyone who worked there did. She also knew she had $42 left in her bank account. It was a Tuesday night in Chicago. Rain slid down the tall black windows of the obsidian room, blurring the city lights outside. Inside, everything was warm and polished, dark wood, low lighting, leather chairs that cost more than Margot's monthly rent. Margot adjusted her apron and winced. Her hips still hurt from slamming into a subway turnstile that morning when she rushed to work. She was 24, tired, and one late payment away from losing her tiny apartment. She wasn't even supposed to be on the floor that night. "Sarah's sick," Henri said sharply from the host's stand. Sarah, the lead server, had called 10 minutes before the shift started. "Flu," she claimed. The convenient kind that appeared only when certain reservations were booked. Henri grabbed Margot's arm and pulled her toward the kitchen entrance. "Table 9 is reserved," he whispered. His eyes were wide, restless. "If he comes in, you pour water. You take the order. You disappear. You do not speak unless spoken to." Margot was balancing a tray of Pinot Noir glasses. "Who is he?" she asked, distracted. Henri hesitated. Then he leaned closer. "Silas Mercer." The name moved through the air like a curse. Margot had heard it before. Everyone had. The Mercers owned half the shipping yards along the lake. They funded campaigns. They crushed businesses. The newspapers called Silas a venture investor. The streets called him something else. "Don't poke the bear," Henri muttered. At 8:15 p.m. the restaurant changed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was like someone sucked the air out of the room. Conversations softened. Laughter stopped. Forks paused midair. The heavy oak doors opened. 3 men walked in. 2 of them were thick-necked and broad-shouldered, wearing suits that didn't quite hide the fact that they were there to break bones if needed. The third man walked between them. Silas Mercer. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly. His dark hair was swept back neatly. His expression was calm. Too calm. His eyes were pale and sharp, like ice that never melted. He didn't hurry. He didn't look around. He simply moved forward and sat at table 9. His men took positions near the bar. Henri shoved a crystal pitcher into Margot's hands. "Go." Margot took a slow breath and walked toward table 9. She felt every eye in the room on her back. Silas was looking at his phone when she arrived. "Good evening," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Still or sparkling?" He didn't look up. He tapped his finger against the tablecloth. Tap, tap. Dismissal. Margot stood there. "Sir," she tried again, louder this time. "Still or sparkling?" Silas stopped tapping. Slowly he lifted his head. When his eyes met hers, a cold feeling slid down her spine. "I didn't order you to speak," he said calmly. His voice was smooth and low. "I tapped for water." "That doesn't tell me which kind," Margot replied before she could stop herself. "I'm not a mind reader." Silence exploded across the restaurant. Henri froze near the kitchen doors. Silas studied her face with quiet interest. "What is your name?" he asked. "Margot." He leaned back slightly in his chair. "Well, Margot," he said, "you seem to believe your opinion matters here. It does not. You are here to serve. Poor." Something inside her snapped. She had spent 2 years working double shifts while caring for her sick mother. She had eaten instant noodles so she could afford medication. She had swallowed insults from customers who thought tips were optional. Tonight she was tired. She tilted the pitcher. Her hand shook. She aimed for the glass. She missed. Water and ice spilled over the rim and cascaded down the cuff of Silas's suit, soaking into the polished leather of his shoes. The sound of ice hitting the floor was louder than it should have been. A bodyguard at the bar stepped forward. His hand slipped inside his jacket. Margot's heart slammed into her ribs. I tripped," she stammered. Silas stood slowly. He was taller than she expected. He reached into his jacket. Margot's breath stopped. Instead of a weapon, he pulled out a crisp white handkerchief. He dabbed at his cuff calmly. "Leave the bottle," he said. That was all. Margot placed the pitcher down with shaking hands and rushed into the kitchen. Henri grabbed her shoulders. "Go out the back," he hissed. "Don't clock out. Just go." Margot didn't argue. She ran into the alley, rain soaking her hair instantly. Every step felt like it might be her last. She expected a gunshot. She expected pain. Nothing came. She made it to the subway and boarded the train with trembling hands. She was alive. But she knew one thing clearly. Men like Silas Mercer did not forget. The next 3 days felt like living inside a nightmare. Every black SUV that slowed near her apartment made her duck into the nearest store. She avoided eye contact with strangers. She jumped at sudden sounds. She called the Obsidian Room twice. No one answered. By Friday morning, her bank account had slipped into negative numbers. Rent was due. Mr. Henderson, her landlord, had made it clear that excuses did not delay payments. Fear did not count as currency. She had no choice. Margot walked through the back entrance of the restaurant at 4 p.m. The kitchen was quiet. Too quiet. Henri stepped out of his office. He looked different. He wore a new watch. His shirt was crisp. He wasn't sweating. "You're not fired," he said flatly. Margot blinked. "I spilled water on Silas Mercer." "I know. Then why am I here?" "He requested you." The words felt like ice in her veins. "He has a reservation tonight. Table 9. 8 o'clock. You're his exclusive server." Henri handed her a freshly pressed apron. "Whatever you do tonight," he said quietly, "give him what he wants. I don't want blood on my floor." Margot tied the apron strings slowly. Running required money. She had none. At exactly 8 p.m. the doors opened again. Silas Mercer walked in alone. No bodyguards. No noise. He wore a navy suit this time. Sure. Clean. He sat at table 9 and placed a black leather notebook on the table. Margot approached. "Good evening," she said carefully. "No water," Silas replied. "Whiskey. Mullen 25. Neat." She returned with the drink and placed it in front of him. He didn't touch it. "Sit." "I can't," she said. "It's against policy." "I own the building," he said calmly. "I purchased it this morning. Policy is mine." Henri gave her a small nod from across the room. Margot pulled out the chair and sat down. "Why am I here?" she asked. "If you're going to kill me over the shoes, I can't afford them." Silas lifted his glass. "If I wanted you dead," he said quietly, "you would not have made it to the subway." She held his gaze. "Then what?" "I am curious," he said. "Everyone fears me. But you corrected me." "I was tired," she replied. "And fear doesn't pay rent." His eyes narrowed slightly. "You have someone depending on you." She stiffened. "That's none of your business." He gave a small laugh. He reached into his pocket and slid a black credit card across the table. It had no numbers. Only his signature. "Be my dinner companion," he said. "Sit with me. Speak to me like a normal person. In return, your rent and your brother's expenses are handled." Her breath caught. "And if I refuse?" He took a slow sip of whiskey. "Then I go back to ruining the lives of people who annoy me." She thought of hospital bills. She thought of Toby sitting alone in a state facility. She picked up the card. "I'm ordering the lobster," she said. A faint smile touched his lips. "Good choice." For the next hour, the restaurant seemed normal again. They ate. They talked. The room slowly exhaled. Until the doors burst open. A man stepped inside. And he was heading straight for table 9. Dessert arrived like nothing had happened. A clean white plate. A neat slice of cake. A spoon that shone under the dim lights. For one strange hour, the Obsidian Room had breathed again. The whispers had returned. The clink of glasses came back. Even the pianist at the corner resumed his soft, careful notes, as if music could pretend danger wasn't sitting at table 9. Margot sat stiffly across from Silas Mercer, pretending her hands were not shaking beneath the table. Silas ate like a man who had never rushed in his life. He cut his food in perfect pieces, took slow bites, and watched her with that same calm focus that made her feel like she was being measured. Margot tried to keep her voice steady. She answered his questions without giving him too much. She kept her body angled slightly away, ready to stand up at the first sign of trouble. She kept reminding herself that the black card in her apron pocket was real. Rent. Toby. Bills. Survive the night. Then the front doors slammed open. The sound did not match the restaurant. It was too loud. Too violent. It ripped through the quiet like a fist through paper. A man stormed in. He wore a heavy leather jacket dripping rain. A jagged scar ran down one cheek. His boots left wet marks on the polished floor. He didn't look around. He marched straight toward table 9 like he owned the place. "Mercer," the man shouted. The entire room froze. Every head turned. Every breath stopped. Margot's stomach dropped. Silas didn't flinch. He didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't even look surprised. He simply rested his hand on the steak knife lying beside his plate, as if he was choosing cutlery, not preparing for a fight. "Lev," Silas said calmly, saying the name like he was greeting a late guest. "You're interrupting my date." Lev's mouth twisted with disgust. His eyes slid to Margot. "Date?" he sneered. "You're scraping the bottom of the barrel, Mercer." "A waitress." Margot felt heat rise into her face. Not because she cared what Lev thought, but because she could feel every person in the room watching her like she was already a dead woman. Silas's gaze didn't leave Lev. "Go home," Silas said, his voice low. "Before you do something you can't undo." Lev laughed. It was sharp and ugly. "I have a message from the Moretti family," he spat. His hand moved inside his jacket. Everything happened at once. Silas didn't wait to find out if Lev was reaching for a note or a gun. He grabbed the edge of the heavy oak table and flipped it sideways with shocking strength. Plates crashed. Glass shattered. The candle slid off and hit the floor. Margot screamed as the table slammed down like a wall between them and the room. Silas grabbed her by the waist and hauled her behind it so fast her chair toppled over. A gunshot exploded. The mirror behind the bar cracked and burst into glittering pieces. People screamed. Chairs scraped. Someone knocked over a tray. Another shot rang out. Someone cried. Margot pressed her hands over her head, shaking. Silas's body shielded hers as he leaned slightly to the side. A sleek pistol appeared in his hand like it had been part of him the whole time. Bang, bang. 2 shots fired back. A heavy thud followed. Margot dared to peek over the edge of the overturned table. Lev was on the floor, clutching his shoulder. His face was twisted in pain. His gun skittered away, lost under chairs. But the danger didn't end. The front doors swung open again. 2 men in ski masks rushed in with fast, violent steps. They didn't stop to look at Leviticus. They didn't care that customers were screaming. They moved toward the kitchen. Silas's jaw tightened. "Move," he snapped. Margot tried to stand, but her legs felt like rubber. A bullet tore into the doorframe near her head, splintering wood. Chips sprayed into her hair and face. Margot screamed and ducked. Silas grabbed her arm hard enough to hurt and yanked her toward the swinging double doors. They crashed into the kitchen. The kitchen was chaos without people. The burners were still on. A pan hissed with unattended scallops. Steam rose from a pot. A knife lay on a cutting board like someone had dropped it mid-slice and run. Which Margot realized was exactly what happened. "Henri," she gasped, her voice thin. No answer. Silas scanned the room quickly, eyes sharp, breathing steady, as if he was in a place he had trained for his whole life. He pushed Margot forward. "Back exit," he ordered. As they ran past the line of stations, Margot caught a glimpse of the walk-in refrigerator. The door was cracked open just enough for her to see 2 terrified eyes peeking out. "Henri." He looked like a man praying not to be found. Silas didn't stop. They reached the back door. Then it flew open. A 4th man stepped inside. He held a shotgun. Margot froze. There was nowhere to go. The gunman raised the weapon. Margot's mind went blank. She couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. Silas didn't hesitate. He grabbed a cast-iron skillet from a burner. It was still smoking hot. In one smooth motion he hurled it like a discus. The skillet smashed into the gunman's face with a sickening crunch. The man dropped instantly, collapsing onto the tile. The shotgun clattered away, skidding across the greasy floor. Margot made a sound that wasn't even a scream. It was pure panic leaking out of her. "Don't look," Silas snapped, stepping over the groaning man. He kicked the shotgun under a prep table. Then he shoved the heavy metal back door open. They burst into the alley. Rain slammed down in thick sheets, washing trash and oil into black streams. The alley smelled like wet concrete and old garbage. A sleek black Audi R8 was parked illegally near the dumpster, engine silent, the kind of car that didn't belong in a place like this. Silas dug into his pocket for keys. His hands were slick. Margot stared. Blood. Dark and shiny in the rain. "You're hit," she gasped. "Grazed," Silas grunted. He unlocked the car. "Get in." Margot stumbled back. "I can't go with you," she said, voice shaking. "This is kidnapping." Silas yanked the passenger door open and shoved her inside with one hard push. "This is survival," he said coldly. "They saw your face. You're a witness. If you stay here, you're dead within 10 minutes. Margot's chest tightened. She hated that the logic made sense. Silas vaulted into the driver's seat and slammed the door. Behind them, the kitchen door burst open again. Gunfire cracked into the alley. Sparks jumped from the pavement. Silas threw the car into reverse. The Audi fishtailed on the slick ground, then caught traction and shot backward. He spun the wheel, swung the car around, and slammed forward. They burst out of the alley onto the main street, narrowly missing a yellow taxi that blared its horn. Margot grabbed the dashboard, fingers white. "Who are they?" she shouted. "Who tries to kill someone over dinner?" Silas's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. A heavy SUV roared out of the alley behind them, headlights glaring like angry eyes. "The Moretti family," Silas said, voice calm. "Old rivals. They think I broke a truce." "Did you?" Margot demanded. Silas made a sharp turn, tires screaming. "I don't break truces," he said. "I end them. But I didn't start this." The SUV followed, clipping a parked car. Metal screamed. Glass burst. Margot flinched. Silas drove like he wasn't afraid to die. He warned her once. "Hang on." "I am hanging on." Margot yelled. Silas killed the headlights. The world outside went dark. "What are you doing?" Margot screamed. "You'll kill us." "Disappearing," Silas said. He yanked the handbrake. The car spun in the wet street, turning them around in a violent circle. For one terrifying second, it looked like they were facing the oncoming SUV. Margot thought he was going to crash on purpose. Then Silas threw the car into reverse, gunned it, and shot backward down a hidden ramp. The city swallowed them. Lower Wacker Drive. Concrete walls. Pillars. Darkness. The SUV thundered past above, missing the turn. Silas drove through the underground maze like he knew every inch. Like he had lived under the city longer than he had lived in it. Only after miles did he switch the headlights back on. He exhaled like a man finally letting himself breathe. Margot looked down. Blood was dripping from Silas's sleeve onto the gear shift. "You're bleeding a lot," she whispered. "I've had worse," Silas muttered. Glove box. Burner phone. Margot opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a cheap flip phone. And a Glock 19. Her stomach turned. She lifted the phone. "Who do I call?" Silas glanced at the screen and cursed under his breath. "Dead," he said. "Battery's gone." He slammed his fist against the steering wheel, then hissed in pain. "My main phone is back at the restaurant," he muttered. "We're cut off." Margot swallowed hard. "So where are we going?" Silas stared ahead, eyes tired but sharp. "We can't go to my penthouse," he said. "They'll watch it." He tightened his grip on the wheel. "We can't go to the estate," he added. "My father will ask questions." He turned his head slightly toward her. "I have a safe house," he said. "Nobody knows about it. Not even my crew." Margot's throat went dry. The Audi accelerated deeper into the night. And Margot realized she had just crossed a line she might never be able to uncross. The car left the underground tunnels and cut through the darker parts of the city where streetlights flickered and factories stood like hollow skeletons. They stopped in front of a brick building that looked abandoned. Its windows were black. The old sign above the entrance had lost half its letters. Rain ran down the walls in thin streams. "This is it," Silas said. Margot stared. "This?" He stepped out first. The front door required a code. His fingers shook slightly as he pressed the numbers. The lock clicked. Inside, the hallway smelled of dust and old metal. The elevator doors were open but dead. "Stairs," Silas muttered. 6 flights. By the second landing, his breathing grew heavier. By the fourth, his hand was gripping the railing tightly. Blood had soaked through the side of his navy suit, dark and spreading. Margot followed close behind, unsure if she was there to help him or run the moment he collapsed. At the top floor, he entered another code on a steel door. It opened. Margot stepped inside and froze. She expected dark leather couches, weapons on the walls, something cold and brutal. Instead, the loft was wide and warm. Exposed brick walls. Tall bookshelves reaching the ceiling. A grand piano under a soft layer of dust. A worn velvet sofa near a large window. Lamps cast golden light across wooden floors. It looked like someone lived there quietly. Silas staggered toward the kitchen island and leaned both hands on the marble surface. "First aid kit," he said through clenched teeth. "And whiskey. Any bottle." Margot moved automatically. She opened cabinets until she found a heavy military trauma pack. Under the sink sat a bottle of bourbon. She placed both on the counter. Silas tried to remove his jacket but stopped with a sharp breath. The fabric had stuck to the wound. "I can't," he said. Margot crossed her arms. "I'm a waitress, not a doctor." "I don't need a doctor," he replied. His voice was thinner now. "I need hands." He looked at her directly. "Please." The word sounded strange coming from him. Margot hesitated only a second before stepping forward. "Sit," she said quietly. She grabbed scissors from the kit and cut through the sleeve of his jacket and shirt. When the fabric fell away, she sucked in a breath. The bullet had torn across his shoulder. It hadn't gone deep enough to kill him, but it had ripped the muscle badly. Blood still oozed steadily. "This is going to hurt," she warned. "Do it." She poured bourbon over the wound. Silas hissed sharply. His fingers dug into the edge of the counter so hard the marble made a faint cracking sound. She wiped away blood and examined the tear. "You need stitches," he said. Margot's head snapped up. "I can't sew a person." "It's just skin," he replied. "Like mending a hem. Do it or I bleed out." Her stomach twisted. She threaded the curved needle with shaking hands and dipped it into bourbon to clean it. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Talk," Silas said, eyes squeezed shut. "Distract me." Margot swallowed and pressed the needle into his skin. He flinched but didn't move away. "You asked about my brother," she began, focusing on the rhythm of pushing and pulling the thread. "His name is Toby." Silas's jaw tightened as she worked. "He's 19, she continued. "But he thinks like he's 10. Doctors say developmental delay. He trusts people too easily." She tightened another stitch. "Last year, some boys convinced him to hold their backpack while they went into a store. They robbed it. When police came, Toby was the one holding the bag." Silas opened one eye slightly. "They charged him as an accomplice?" he asked. "Yes." Her voice shook. He didn't even understand what was happening. "Now he's in a state facility. It's loud. It's rough. He cries every time I visit." She tied another stitch. "I need $20,000 for a lawyer who specializes in capacity cases. Someone who can prove he didn't know what he was doing. If we win, he can be moved to a proper care home." She finished the final knot and cut the thread. Silence filled the loft. Silas took the bourbon bottle and drank deeply. Color slowly returned to his face. He rolled his shoulder carefully. "You did well," he said. Margot wiped her hands on a towel. "I've stitched tablecloths before," she muttered. He studied her for a moment. "I can get him out," Silas said. She froze. "Don't joke." "I don't joke about business." He stood straighter now despite the pain. "One call," he continued. "Charges dropped. Record erased. Private facility. Paid in full for 10 years. Margot stared at him. "What's the catch?" He walked slowly toward the window, looking out at the rain. "The Moretti family," he said. "They want a truce. A territory deal. They believe I am unstable. Dangerous." She crossed her arms again. "You are dangerous." A faint smile touched his lips. "They need proof I'm becoming legitimate," he said. "Grounded. Settled. I told Victor Moretti I was engaged to a civilian. A woman with no connection to this life." Margot felt her chest tighten. "You lied." "It was strategic," he replied. "But tonight they saw me protect you. Leave with you. In their eyes, you are that woman." "No," she said immediately. "Absolutely not. If you walk out that door," he said calmly, "they will see you as my weakness. They will use you to get to me. And if they can't find you, they will find Toby." Her heart pounded. "You put me in this?" she whispered. "Yes," he answered. The honesty hit harder than denial would have. "I'm offering you protection," he continued. 6 months. You live with me. You wear my ring. You attend public events. You act like the woman who calmed the storm. And in return? Your brother is free. Your debts are gone. After 6 months we stage a breakup. You receive enough money to disappear anywhere." Margot paced once across the room. "And if I refuse?" "You go back to your life," he said evenly. "And I cannot guarantee it will remain untouched." She closed her eyes briefly. "Toby first," she said. "And there are rules." His eyebrow lifted. "No sleeping together. No romance. No touching. This is business." A small smirk appeared. "I don't force women," he said. "And you are too loud to be my type." She rolled her eyes. "Do we have a deal?" He extended his hand. Margot hesitated. Then she took it. Their hands shook firmly. "Deal." A faint red dot appeared on Silas's chest. Margot saw it before he did. "Down!" she screamed. She slammed into him, tackling him to the floor. The window exploded inward. Glass shattered across the room as a bullet tore through the space where he had been standing. They hit the wooden floor hard. Margot's ears rang. Silas looked at the broken window with pure fury. "I thought you said no one knew about this place," she shouted. His face darkened. Someone does, he growled. There's a rat. He pushed himself up despite the pain. The rain blew through the shattered window. The deal just changed, he said coldly. We're not hiding. Margot swallowed. Where are we going? Silas grabbed his jacket with one hand. Home, he said. And they ran. They didn't speak as they ran down the 6 flights of stairs. Adrenaline pushed them forward. The shattered glass, the red laser, the crack of the rifle shot, it all blurred into one loud memory. Silas moved fast despite the fresh stitches pulling at his shoulder. Margot followed close behind, her pulse racing. The rain outside had not slowed. It fell harder as if the night itself was angry. They reached the car. Silas drove without hesitation. North. The city lights thinned as they left downtown. Buildings grew larger, quieter. Streets widened. The air seemed colder. Where are we going? Margot asked. My father's estate, Silas said. She glanced at him. You said your family was dangerous. They are, he replied calmly. But it's a different kind of danger. Bullets won't reach you there. That's comforting, she muttered. It's a fortress, he added. Guards. Perimeter walls. Cameras. If someone wants you dead, they'll think twice. And inside. Silas's jaw tightened. Inside, he said slowly, they test you. They measure you. They look for cracks. Margot folded her arms. Wonderful. He glanced at her briefly. My father respects strength. He despises weakness. He will try to provoke you. And your brother? Roman, Silas said, a faint edge entering his voice. He smiles too much. Never trust a man who smiles when he shouldn't. The car passed through quiet tree-lined roads. You're not a waitress anymore, Silas continued. Tonight you're an art restoration expert. Margot blinked. Excuse me? It explains your hands. It explains your eye for detail. You restore damaged paintings. She stared at her fingers, still stained faintly with dried blood. I can lie, she said softly. Good, Silas replied. Iron gates rose ahead like something out of a dark fairy tale. They opened automatically as the car approached. The Mercer estate appeared beyond them. It was massive. Gothic stone. Tall windows. Gargoyles perched along the roofline. The house seemed less built than carved from shadow. Armed guards stepped from the trees as the car rolled up the long driveway. They recognized Silas instantly and stepped back. Margot swallowed. The front doors opened before they reached them. A butler in a perfectly tailored suit stood waiting. He took their coats without a word. His eyes paused briefly on the blood staining Silas's sleeve. Your father is in the library, he said. The library doors opened to a warm glow. Cigar smoke drifted through the air. The smell of old paper and polished wood filled the room. A fire crackled in the massive stone fireplace. Elias Mercer sat near the flames in a wheelchair. A blanket covered his legs. His hair was white. His face was thin and sharp. His eyes were not weak. Roman stood behind him, hands folded neatly, expression soft and pleasant. Silas, Elias said dryly. You're bleeding on my Persian rug. Silas stepped forward without hesitation. The loft was compromised, he said evenly. There's a leak. Roman's smile widened slightly. Or perhaps you were careless, he suggested. Silas didn't look at him. I wasn't careless. Elias's gaze shifted to Margot. And who is this? Silas rested a firm hand at the small of her back. My fiancée. The word landed heavily in the room. Roman's eyebrows lifted. Since when? Elias asked. Since I decided I needed something more than territory, Silas replied smoothly. Elias rolled forward slightly, stopping inches from Margot. He examined her boots. Her hair. The stubborn tilt of her chin. She looks like a stray cat, he said. Margot held his gaze. Strays survive, she replied quietly. Roman's smile faded just a little. Elias leaned closer. What is your father's name? Margot did not hesitate. Frank, she said. He was a drunk. He died in a gutter. I built myself from nothing. Silence followed. Roman looked surprised. Silas did not speak, but something in his expression shifted. Elias stared at her for several long seconds. Then he laughed. It was dry and rough. Honest, he murmured. I prefer honest. He leaned back. Roman, get her a drink. Roman stepped forward, masking his irritation. And you, Elias said to Silas, see to that shoulder before you stain anything else. Silas remained standing. We need to address the leak. We will, Elias said calmly. But first we make a statement. He gestured toward the window. The solstice gala is tomorrow night. We announced the engagement publicly. Silas stiffened. That's reckless. It's strength, Elias corrected. If you hide, the Morettas assume weakness. Weakness invites attack. Margot felt the weight of the decision settle around her. Elias's gaze sharpened. The rat will reveal himself in a crowd, he said. Tomorrow is our trap. The next 24 hours felt unreal. Margot was escorted to a guest wing larger than her entire apartment building. A team of stylists arrived within minutes. They scrubbed her skin, brushed out her hair, trimmed and shaped until she barely recognized herself. Her rough hands were softened with creams. Her nails were shaped. Her posture corrected. Silas disappeared into meetings with security advisors. Margot barely saw him. When the gala night arrived, she stood alone in front of a full-length mirror. The emerald gown hugged her frame like silk poured over skin. A long slit revealed one leg. The back dipped low. A diamond necklace rested at her collarbone, heavy and brilliant. She hardly recognized the woman staring back. This is armor, she whispered to herself. A knock sounded. Silas entered. He wore a black tuxedo. His injured arm rested in a dark sling that blended with the suit. For a brief second he simply stared. You look, he began, then paused. Adequate, he finished. Margot raised a brow. That's the best you can do? He stepped closer. His fingers adjusted the clasp of the necklace gently. His touch brushed the back of her neck. A spark ran through her unexpectedly. He stepped back. Tonight is the end game, he said quietly. The Morettas will be there. The treaty will be signed. And the rat. We'll try to stop it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver compact. Open it. Margot flipped it open. Instead of powder, a thin ceramic blade rested inside. If anyone tries to remove you from that ballroom, he said calmly, you use this. Aim for the neck. She snapped it shut. Her hands did not shake. I understand. Silas studied her one more time. You know how to read people, he added. You've done it for years in dining rooms. Margot nodded slowly. I'll watch. The car ride to the gala was silent. Lights flashed as they approached the Grand Hotel entrance. Music drifted through open doors. Laughter spilled into the night air. Silas stepped out first, then offered his uninjured arm. Margot took it. The doors opened wide. They stepped inside together. Into the Shark Tank. The solstice gala glittered like a crown jewel. The grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hotel shone with impossible wealth. Chandeliers the size of small cars hung from a gold leaf ceiling. Crystal glasses caught the light and scattered it across marble floors. Women in silk and diamonds moved like living art. Men in tailored tuxedos stood in clusters, voices low, laughter controlled. It was a room where politicians shook hands with criminals and nobody asked questions. Margot entered on Silas's arm. Flashbulbs exploded in white bursts around them. Cameras clicked. Reporters called out questions that were ignored. Silas leaned slightly toward her. Don't smile too much, he murmured. Boredom signals power. Margot adjusted her expression instantly. Come. Cool. Unimpressed. He guided her through the crowd smoothly, like a captain steering a ship through crowded waters. Senator Harris, Silas said, shaking hands. C.O. Matthews, he continued. Margot nodded politely, spoke when necessary, laughed lightly when expected. She touched Silas's arm just enough to look close but not desperate. She felt eyes on her constantly. Some curious, some jealous, some calculating. Silas leaned closer again. There, he said quietly. Across the room stood a group of men who looked carved from stone. Broad shoulders. Hard faces. Dark suits that fit too well. Victor Moretti stood at the center. White beard. Heavy build. His presence drew space around him. Beside him stood his son. Silas guided Margot forward. The air felt thicker as they approached. Music from the orchestra seemed to fade beneath the weight of tension. Silas, Victor rumbled, extending a hand. And the famous fiancée. Silas nodded. This is Margot. Victor took her hand gently and kissed it. His lips were cold. She's alive, Victor said, studying her face. Interesting choice. I like things that fight back, Silas replied calmly. Victor's eyes flickered with amusement. We're ready to sign tonight, he said. Midnight. Private room. No weapons. Just business. Silas gave a slight nod. Agreed. Victor and his men stepped away. Margot exhaled slowly. Something felt wrong. It wasn't obvious. It was subtle. The same feeling she got when a customer planned to leave without paying. "Did you see the waiter?" she whispered. "Which one?" "The one with the champagne tray near your brother." Silas glanced around. "He was watching Roman," Margot said quietly. "Not the glasses." Silas's jaw tightened. "Roman is useless," he said under his breath. "But he's not suicidal." "Maybe he's not betting against the family," Margot said. "Maybe he's betting against you." The orchestra began a slow waltz. Silas extended his hand. "Dance." They stepped onto the floor. Silas led smoothly despite his injured shoulder. His movements were controlled and confident. Margot followed, her emerald gown brushing the polished floor. For a brief moment it felt almost normal. Almost. "You're good at this," she murmured. "I had lessons," he replied quietly. "Focus. What do you see?" Margot turned slightly as they rotated. The waiter. He was moving toward the private signing room. Her breath caught. "He's going to the door," she whispered. Silas shifted them slightly to improve his angle without drawing attention. The waiter reached into his pocket and pulled out a small gray container. He rubbed something lightly onto the metal handle. It looked like dust. "Poison," Margot breathed. "Contact." Silas's expression hardened. "If Victor touches that handle, he drops. And they'll blame you," she finished. A muscle twitched in his jaw. "Roman," he muttered. Victor Moretti was already walking toward the private room. 10 feet away. Silas could not reach him without breaking the calm. "Do something," Margot urged. "I can't create a scene," he said tightly. She didn't hesitate. Margot broke away from him mid-turn. She didn't run. She stumbled. A sharp gasp left her lips as she collided directly with a passing server carrying a tray of red wine. The tray lifted into the air. 5 glasses of deep red Cabernet spilled like slow-motion rain. The wine splashed directly onto Victor Moretti's white shirt. The ballroom fell silent. The red liquid spread across his chest, staining fabric like fresh blood. "Oh my God!" Margot cried loudly. "I'm so sorry." Victor stood still. His bodyguard stepped forward immediately. Silas moved between them. "My fiancé had too much champagne," Silas said smoothly. "My apologies." Victor's eyes burned with fury. But then he looked at the door. At the handle. At the faint dust clinging to it. His gaze shifted to the waiter who had begun backing toward the service hallway. Understanding flickered across his face. "Get me another shirt," Victor growled. "And bring me that waiter." His men moved instantly. "We sign in the kitchen," Victor added coldly. The tension cracked slightly. The music hesitantly resumed. Silas grabbed Margot's arm, pulling her closer. "You're insane," he whispered. "Clumsy," she corrected calmly. He stared at her. Then without warning he kissed her. Art. Not gentle. Not rehearsed. His hand tightened against her waist. His mouth was warm and firm. The kiss was not polite or staged. It lasted only seconds. When he pulled back his voice was low. "For the cameras." Margot's knees felt weak. "Right," she breathed. But as they turned toward the service entrance she caught sight of Roman. He stood near the exit. His face was pale. He held his phone tightly in one hand. And he was looking at her. Not surprised. Not impressed. Angry. The look in his eyes promised something dark. Silas guided her toward the kitchen doors. The ballroom noise faded behind them. The night was not finished. It was only shifting. And Roman was still standing. The private kitchen of the Palmer House Hotel was bright and harsh compared to the glittering ballroom. Stainless steel counters reflected the overhead lights. The air smelled of soap, garlic, and steam. Industrial sinks hummed quietly. Pots hung in neat rows above the prep tables. A large butcher block stood in the center of the room. Victor Moretti stood before it. The treaty papers lay flat against the wood. He removed his stained jacket and tossed it aside. A clean white shirt had replaced the ruined one. His expression was cold but controlled. Silas stood opposite him, one hand resting lightly on the edge of the table. His injured shoulder was stiff. His face looked pale beneath the bright lights. Margot stood slightly behind him, watching everything. Victor signed first. His pen scratched heavily across the paper. Then he slid it forward. Silas signed without hesitation. The waiter who had dusted the door handle stood trembling near the back entrance, held tightly by 2 of Victor's men. Victor did not look at him. "Take him," Victor ordered. The waiter's face drained of color as he was dragged through the service door. It swung shut behind them. The kitchen fell quiet. Only the hum of refrigeration units filled the silence. Victor gathered the papers and nodded once. "This ends tonight," he said firmly. He left without another word. The heavy doors closed again. Only Silas and Margot remained. Silas leaned back against a prep counter slowly. The color drained further from his face. The adrenaline that had carried him through the ballroom was fading. His hand pressed briefly against his shoulder. Margot stepped closer. "We did it," she said, relief breaking through her voice. "The treaty is signed." Silas shook his head slightly. "Not yet." She frowned. "There's one rat left," he added quietly. As if summoned by the words, the service doors pushed open again. Roman entered. He looked perfect. His tuxedo was untouched. His hair neatly styled. His smile calm and polite. "Silas," Roman said smoothly. "I heard about the excitement. Moretti's shirt. Quite dramatic." He walked forward casually. "But the treaty is signed," he continued. "Father will be pleased." Silas straightened. His expression hardened. "Drop the act," Silas said flatly. Roman stopped smiling. "The waiter talked," Silas added. "He confessed about the poison on the door. He mentioned who paid him." Roman's face shifted. The softness vanished. What replaced it was sharp and ugly. "You were always the favorite," Roman spat. His voice echoed slightly off the steel walls. "The brilliant son. The chosen heir. Father never looked at me the way he looked at you." Silas did not blink. "You think I don't know that?" Roman continued, stepping closer. "If the Morettis had touched that handle tonight, Victor would have died. They would have blamed you. They would have torn you apart. And you?" Silas asked calmly. "I would have been the grieving brother," Roman said. "The loyal son who avenged you. I would have taken control." Margot felt the air grow colder. "You don't have the spine," Silas replied evenly. "You would have been dead within a week running this family." Roman's eyes darkened. "I have enough spine to finish what the sniper started." He reached inside his waistband. A snub-nosed revolver appeared in his hand. He raised it quickly. The barrel pointed directly at Silas's chest. Silas was still recovering from blood loss. His reaction time slowed. He did not reach for his own weapon. There was no time. Margot didn't think. She moved. To her right stood the dish pit, stacked high with clean ceramic chargers, heavy dinner plates thicker than normal dishes. Her hand grabbed the top one. Roman's finger tightened on the trigger. Margot hurled the plate with all her strength. "Order up," she shouted instinctively. The ceramic disc spun through the air. It smashed into Roman's hand with a sharp crack. The revolver discharged wildly, the bullet firing into the ceiling. The sound rang painfully through the kitchen. The gun fell to the tile floor. Roman screamed, clutching his wrist. Silas moved instantly. Despite his injured shoulder, he closed the distance in one stride. His fist connected with Roman's jaw. The impact was solid and brutal. Roman's head snapped sideways. He collapsed onto the kitchen tiles before he could recover. The revolver skidded across the floor. Silas kicked it under a stainless steel table. Roman lay unconscious, breathing but unmoving. The kitchen fell silent again. Margot stood frozen, chest rising and falling rapidly. The plate had shattered against Roman's hand. White ceramic pieces scattered across the floor. Silas stared at her. His breathing was heavy. "You," he said slowly. "You threw a plate at him." Margot's hands began to shake now that it was over. "I told you," she replied, voice unsteady. "Waitresses have good aim." Silas let out a short breath. There was something in his eyes that had not been there before. Not fear. Not calculation. Respect. He glanced down at Roman, then back at her. "You just saved my life," he said quietly. Margot swallowed. The reality of what she had done settled heavily inside her chest. Security would arrive soon. The family would know everything within minutes. But for now, the immediate danger had passed. Roman had made his move. And Roman had lost. Silas straightened carefully, ignoring the pain pulling at his stitches. He looked down at his brother one last time. "It's over," he said. Margot wasn't sure if he meant the attack. Or something deeper. But one thing was certain. The kitchen floor was littered with broken porcelain. And Roman would never smile the same way again. 6 months can feel like a lifetime when every day is lived under a contract. The headlines called it a powerful alliance. Society magazines printed photographs of them stepping out of cars, attending charity galas, standing side by side at ribbon cuttings. Business columns praised the stability of the Knox name. Rumors about war faded. The city breathed easier. But behind the polished images and formal smiles, Every day had been structured, calculated, and observed. The first change came quickly. Within 2 weeks of the agreement, Toby's case disappeared from public records. Margot received a call from a private legal firm she had never contacted. They spoke gently, clearly. The charges had been dismissed. The evidence reviewed. His record wiped clean. No explanation offered. Within days, Toby was transferred from the state holding facility into a private residential care center outside the city. The building was quiet. Clean. The staff spoke softly and patiently. The windows looked out onto gardens instead of concrete walls. When Margot visited him the first time, he looked confused but happy. "They said I don't have to go back," Toby told her, eyes bright. She smiled through tears. "They said you're safe now." The relief that settled in her chest was heavier than fear had ever been. Her debts vanished just as quietly. Medical bills marked as paid. Overdue notices cleared. Her bank account reflected numbers she had never seen before. Enough to breathe. Enough to rest. The contract had done what it promised. In public, Margot stood beside Silas as his fiancé. She attended formal dinners in rooms larger than ballrooms. She learned the difference between polite smiles and dangerous ones. She memorized names, faces, alliances. She learned when to speak and when silence carried more weight. At first, the high society circles felt like another world. Then she realized it was simply a different version of the dining room she once worked in. The powerful were no different than customers at table 9. They tested. They probed. They watched for weakness. Margot adapted. She chose her words carefully. She listened more than she spoke. She observed who shook hands too firmly, who avoided eye contact, who laughed too quickly. Silas noticed. "You read rooms better than half the men I've worked with for years," he told her once during a quiet drive home from an event. She shrugged. "I've been reading tables since I was 18. The truce held. The Moretti family remained quiet. No sudden moves. No public challenges. Business stabilized. Investments expanded. War had been avoided. Silas appeared more controlled, more measured in public. Fewer reckless moves. More strategic patience. Newspapers began to describe him differently. Less volatile. More composed. Margot watched the transformation closely. Sometimes she wondered if it was an act. Sometimes she wondered if it was real. Living together required discipline. The contract had rules and they followed them strictly. Separate rooms. No crossing boundaries. No confusion. At least at first. But 6 months is long enough for patterns to form. They ate dinner together most nights when schedules allowed. Not for appearances. Simply because they were already at the same table. They spoke about neutral things. Books. Architecture. Restaurants. Occasionally they argued. Silas disliked inefficiency. Margot disliked arrogance. Their disagreements were sharp but controlled. Neither crossed the line they had drawn. Still, something shifted gradually. The tension changed. The cold distance softened. Margot began to notice the details no one else saw. The way Silas rubbed his shoulder when he thought no one was looking. The way his voice lowered when speaking to children at charity events. The way he avoided unnecessary cruelty in negotiations when alternatives existed. He noticed things about her too. How she checked her phone before bed to confirm Toby's schedule. How she adjusted her posture automatically when entering a room full of powerful people. How she still preferred simple food late at night over elaborate dishes. Publicly they looked convincing. Privately they were careful. As the end of the contract approached, unspoken tension settled between them. The date was circled quietly in Margot's mind. 6 months exactly. The agreement had been clear. A staged separation. A public explanation. Financial freedom. A new start. She could leave the city if she wanted. Open her own place. Travel. Disappear. The choice would be hers. But the closer the final day came, the heavier the silence felt during shared dinners. Silas never mentioned it directly. Neither did she. Instead they continued the routine. Appearances. Events. Dinners. Meetings. Then one afternoon, Margot found herself standing outside the obsidian room. The sign above the door looked unchanged. The same heavy oak doors. The same dim glow through tinted windows. She hadn't been back since that night. The bell above the entrance chimed softly as she stepped inside. The room smelled the same. Leather. Wine. Polished wood. Henri? No. Martin now looked up from behind the bar. He blinked twice before recognition dawned. "You're back," he said carefully. Margot smiled faintly. "Just visiting." Table 9 sat empty. She walked toward it slowly. The chair felt different beneath her now. Not smaller. Not larger. Just familiar. The final day of the contract had arrived. Outside the city moved as always. Inside the air felt still. Silas would arrive soon. The agreement would end. And whatever happened next would not be written on paper. It would be a choice. The Black Orchid Lounge was alive again. The low hum of conversation blended with the clink of silverware and the soft jazz playing through hidden speakers. Candlelight flickered against dark wood panels. Servers moved smoothly between tables. Wine glasses caught warm light and glowed like tiny lanterns. Life had returned to normal. Or at least something close to it. Martin Doyle stood near the bar, checking reservations with unusual calm. He wore a better suit now. Better watch too. The nervous sweat that once lived permanently on his forehead was gone. The restaurant was thriving. Business had never been stronger. Table 9 sat in its usual place. But tonight it looked different. Margot sat there. Not in an apron. Not with a notepad. Not standing and waiting. She wore a soft cream sweater and simple blue jeans. Her hair fell naturally around her shoulders. Her posture was relaxed, open, comfortable. Across from her sat Toby. He looked different too. Healthy. Clean. Well-fed. His shoulders weren't hunched anymore. His eyes were bright. He studied the menu carefully. "I want the burger," he said excitedly, tapping the page. "With fries." Margot smiled warmly. "Get the burger. Get two if you want." Toby grinned, relieved at the freedom. Around them, diners talked and laughed, unaware of how much history lived at that table. Then the heavy oak doors opened. The sound was subtle, but the shift in the room was not. Conversation dipped slightly. Heads turned. Silas Mercer stepped inside. He wore a dark tailored coat. No bodyguards. No visible entourage. He walked calmly without hurry, scanning the room with familiar confidence. But something was different. His expression was lighter. Less guarded. He walked directly toward table 9. Margot watched him approach without standing. "Is this seat taken?" he asked. Margot tilted her head. "That depends," she replied. "Are you going to tip?" A faint chuckle escaped him. A real one. Several nearby diners glanced over, surprised at the sound. Silas pulled out the chair and sat down beside her, not across. Toby looked at him curiously. Silas gave him a small nod. "Good evening, Toby." "Hi," Toby answered shyly. Silas turned back to Margot. "The contract ends today," he said evenly. 6 months. As agreed. Margot folded her hands calmly on the table. "Toby is secure," Silas continued. "His facility is paid for long term. Your debts are cleared. The money is in your account." He paused briefly. "You're free." The words settled between them. "Free. You can leave the city," he added. "Paris. London. Anywhere. Open your own restaurant. Never see another mobster again." Margot looked down at the table for a moment. 6 months ago that offer would have sounded like salvation. She imagined Paris cafes. Fresh starts. A quiet life without tension or danger. But something inside her had changed. She looked up slowly. "I've heard the coffee in Paris is overrated," she said lightly. Silas raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" Margot leaned back slightly. "I realized something," she continued. "I'm not very good at taking orders anymore." A faint spark entered his eyes. "And what are you good at?" "Giving them," she replied calmly. Silas studied her face carefully. "Is that a proposition?" "It's a negotiation," she corrected. Toby looked between them, confused but entertained. Margot turned slightly in her chair to face Silas more directly. "I stay," she said clearly. "But not as an employee. And not as a fake fiancé." Silas's voice lowered slightly. "Then as what?" Margot reached forward and grabbed his tie gently. The movement was deliberate. She pulled him closer. Right there in the center of the restaurant where she once poured water and avoided eye contact. "I stay," she whispered softly, "as the only person in this city who isn't afraid of you." The air around them tightened. Silas's expression shifted. No cameras. No audience manipulation. No stage performance. Margot closed the final inch between them and kissed him. The kiss was steady and certain. Not desperate. Not dramatic. Just real. For a brief second, the entire room seemed to pause. Silas responded without hesitation. His hand rested at her waist, firm but controlled. When they parted, his forehead nearly touched hers. "Deal?" he murmured quietly. This time it wasn't for appearance. It wasn't for a truce. It wasn't for survival. It was choice. Around them, diners watched openly. Nobody looked away. The myth of Table 9 shifted that night. The rules changed. You no longer had to apologize to the floor. You no longer had to avoid eye contact. And you definitely didn't have to kneel. Sometimes the most dangerous act wasn't pulling a trigger. It wasn't signing a contract. It wasn't flipping a table. Sometimes, it was standing your ground when everyone else chose to bow. Margot leaned back comfortably in her chair. Toby raised his hand eagerly for the waiter. "I'm getting 2 burgers," he announced proudly. Margot laughed. Silas smiled beside her. The restaurant hummed around them. And this time, Table 9 belonged to her. Now let me ask you something. If you were in Margot's place, would you have taken the deal? Or would you have run the moment he slid that black card across the table? Tell me in the comments. If you enjoyed this story of danger, strategy, and choice, make sure you like the video. It helps more than you think. And if you want more stories where power meets courage, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Next week's story dives into a darker thriller you won't want to miss. Until then, be careful who you spill water on. It might just change your life.